give people another minute or two to arrive. Then we'll get started.
Tom, I tried to access the slides from last time since I didn't make it, and it keeps giving me an error 404. I don't know if there's another way to share those.
That's like they don't exist there anymore error, right?
Yeah. I tried several times.
Like, let me just check. Okay, let me see if this link works for you. Also learn how to spell November. See if that opens up.
Yeah, that worked. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. All right, let me get my slides going. I don't know why I'm not getting, are you seeing my slides? Okay, I'm not getting a slideshow option, but that's okay. We don't need that. Well, thanks everybody for joining tonight. We'll go ahead and get started. I've already started the recording for people who aren't able to join, but I especially want to appreciate those of you who did join tonight. I know a December 19th meeting might have come as somewhat of a surprise, but it's a great time to be thinking about geography and computer science, I think. And hopefully everybody's looking forward to a nice break. The agenda I have for tonight is just about making sure that I feel like I spend a lot of time in our first two sessions have been a lot of me talking, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to kind of connect about what people are thinking about this fellowship, how to integrate it into your own teaching. I introduced the kind of planning tool, and I've heard from a couple of people thinking about projects, but I wanted there to be a little bit of time for processing around that. I'm going to make another push for your participation and your students' participation in the student GIS mapping contest that we're doing. Not just for you, but for other people. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for students to get involved in developing story maps and thinking about how they can identify topics and resources to use in doing that. And then, like I said, we'll just spend time discussing what you're thinking about your individualized plan. So I did I share in the email a link to the US Census maps? Did anybody have a chance to check those out? I was kind of, yes, Malia, you did?
I did, yeah. And I know Jeff did too. I think he's trying to log on from the classroom. Yeah, but we both fiddled around with them for a little while.
That was one of my great discoveries. I mean, I was at the National Council for the Social Studies conference in Nashville, which is I don't know how many people have been to a conference like this that is, nearly 100 simultaneous sessions at any given time, and just trying to figure out what you kind of navigate your path to go to sessions that meet your interests and to find resources is a challenge in and of itself, but it always pays off, and I always kind of stumble into cool stuff. So I shared that in hopes of promoting the Statistics in Schools program that the US Census Bureau has, and that I think creates all kinds of opportunities for students to develop really practical skills around kind of basic math, but also basic geographic and kind of socioeconomic awareness of their country. So that map that has basically what did it have? I'm holding it here, but it's too big to get out. it has population density. It has the number of federal elected representatives from each state. It has information about population age, about family size. But it turns out what I didn't know until I got home was that there's the elementary, middle, and high school map. So different levels of data and different complexity. So introducing students to state level data at the elementary level, but then the middle and high school maps have county level data, which is very cool to just get students to understand the kind of different levels of geographic analysis. So if anybody had anything to share after looking at that or an idea that how they might use it, I would open the floor now to hear about that.
It's a way to lose a lot of time. I think one thing that I really appreciated, I was working on a grant over this last month, and there's a lot of crossover in building a story where you're about and, you know, understanding the different statistics and doing the process of building that same kind of story and demonstrating need when you're applying for a grant. And so I think it's a really valuable 21st century skill.
All right, well, if you didn't get a chance to check it out, maybe you'll have time later. Josh, were you going to jump in? No. Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to share that resource, and I'll keep sharing other resources that are kind of jumping off points for geographic inquiry and computational thinking, computer aided investigations. And I had mentioned this last time, but I didn't really allocate enough time in the meeting to discuss in any depth the why I put at the top of this screen that you should do this. Because I think for those of you who signed up for this fellowship who were at least interested enough in how computer science and geography intersect to sign up for this professional learning opportunity, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of push yourself to have your students do something where they're directly engaging with geospatial tools and geospatial technology. So the kind of snapshot of the contest is that it is for 4th through 12th grade students to develop story maps that address some issue, some question or concern or appreciation for some part of.
No.
Oh,
I got him wrong again.
You have your hand up?
Oh, Tom, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, I was gonna get you afterwards. I apologize. I was wondering the story map. Sorry, I'm getting feedback over here. I think it's Josh.
There we go.
Okay. You might have said this, but the story map subscription, now they want me to subscribe again. And I know I did have an account where I actually paid before, like long before when I first used it. Do we have to maintain that subscription in order to use it with our students? Or...
You need a subscription. So in order to submit your students' work to the contest, you would need an account. It shouldn't cost you anything.
Because it said $100 a year, but maybe that's.
Yeah, so that is not a organizational account for K-12 schools. So for the last, like, I want to say about 10 years, Esri's been making organizational accounts freely available to schools, both private and public schools. And it's actually inside the US and outside the US. It's pretty universal in its acceptance.
I had a hard time finding that link too. I kind of searched a couple places and I saw where it was available, but I had a hard time figuring out how to sign up as a school.
Okay, let's figure that out together. Because this is important stuff if we're going to talk about this topic at all. So I switched over to the Cal Geography site and we have an Esri education link here. So if you go to this link, and I'll put it in the chat, so you don't have to find it. This is the landing page, and apologies that Esri does tend to change the sites and the links over time. So if you had one like bookmark from prior engagement with Esri, it might not have worked. And sometimes their websites are a little less than obvious, because like if you land at this page, you're seeing the Esri webpage on the share. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if you scroll down here, you have to go through, I believe, teachers. And then teach GIS skills or empower. No, let's find this. GIS skills for a brighter future.
Thank you, Tom. I did have that account under I have two accounts, but I think it defaults you to the other one when you go. So thank you for clarifying. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. And so this is even now showing me options. I thought the sign up for a school account was like the second tier down. Has anybody done this recently? No? Okay. I am going to try see what is happening recently in Esri's world is they just came out with a version of ArcGIS Online that's being branded as National Geographic Mapmaker. Very cool for teaching in many ways because it does not require a sign-in, and it gives students the opportunity to do some layer, import some layers, do some geographic analysis, and even export maps all without a sign-in, which is a new development and it's cool, but does not allow them to save and share a map or a story map online the way that an organizational account does. So I'm looking now for how to sign up for a new account. Okay. This is the link for applying. And what they will do is if you have one for your school already, they will let you know. So you can click right here and you find out if your school has an account, because it's possible somebody else has one that's inactive and they'll help you get that back. Okay. So this is important to know because you do need an account, and it should be relatively easy to set up and to get going. But it is, for anybody to whom that sounds like, oh, it's a little bit of a hassle. It's, one more online software account, one more password that you have to remember to log in. And then students themselves would be assigned logins and passwords to have their own workspace and save their own work.
I've been doing this for years.
Yes.
On this, and so I have actually some things put together to help teachers and students
Awesome.
get on. And so is there a place I could share that information? Like, do we have a collective drive or something we could?
Yes, we
look at
can.
all of
So the easiest way for this group would be to just put it on a shared drive. I absolutely have one where the slides are, where that you guys should have access to. Just make sure that you do.
Because I'm happy to share. I mean, we've been doing this all year already in my class.
And that's the best, I think, because I work on story maps, but I don't work with students on them. So I feel very limited in kind of helping people get up and running. So Nicole, that's a very generous offer. And if you email me a link, and I can get information up on our Cal Geography website as well. Because
it
we're
is
definitely
a little bit, just so you know, it is a little bit of a pain when you're first starting, getting your kids, because you have to create their login. And if you're like my district, you can't email kids from outside entities, only, you know, internal emails from our Gmail accounts. And so you have to create it, and then they have to change. It's kind of a pain. It's not easy like a lot of the other things that we do, but it's totally worth it. And I use it in all subjects: reading, math, science, like novel studies, all of it. So it's worth it, but it is a little bit of a time suck at the beginning.
Awesome. Well, what we could do is, if people are interested and you are so inclined, Nicole, maybe we could set up a time in January for people to just do a little Q&A and ask, you know, if they kind of do a little exploration on their own and then have questions about getting started. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that because I love it. I use it all the time.
Okay, excellent. Very well timed comment. Thank you for sharing. So as I was saying, it's for grades 4 through 12. There's kind of two divisions. There are cash prizes, which was a train wreck this year because our foundation decided suddenly they can't give cash prizes. So all that money is just like locked up in paperwork jail for the moment. But the problem has been solved for 2024 because National Council for Geographic Education is going to hold the money, and they apparently believe they can pay out awards to students. The students who won this year, 2023's edition, should be getting eventually cards, like gift cards that they can use at Target. But fingers crossed we get the money out of jail. So the problem solved it going forward, but the students do submit their work either individually or in groups of 2. And so that's important to know at the outset, just so that you don't get students working in groups where then ownership of the material becomes a challenge. I do see a lot of examples where teachers have students work on kind of a theme or a kind of common resource, and then they develop their own projects out of that. So maybe the students are all participating in one project, and then they're creating their own story maps individually or in groups of 2 about a particular aspect of the project or about their experience with it. There is a lot more information on our website, which is linked off of the slide set. So one of the things, having had the contest up and running for several years, one of the things that we kind of recognize is there's a couple of challenges that for students. One is just thinking about a meaningful geographic question. Students have lots of questions about their community. They have questions about the environment, you know, probably not so much about a state level, but maybe high school students are thinking about issues in California. And that's a big challenge of thinking about a geographic question that's kind of important enough to the student that they're interested in researching it and thinking about it. And that question can then drive the way they present the issue in a story map, because a story map has text and information, and it's got visuals beyond maps as well as maps. So the student has to have something, you know, to be discussing and to be kind of framing both why this is an issue or why it's important to them and what they've learned through the process of putting together the story map. And then that also has to link in a meaningful way to some geographic data that it can analyze and produce maps of. So one of the most challenging things, I think, for people is if they think that the students have to produce their own data on the maps. There's extra score, you know, points scored in the contest if students produce their own data, but by no means does creating their own story map require them to create their own data. So most of the story maps that get submitted are using existing data sets with students focusing their inquiry on their particular area of interest, or combining a couple different data sets to analyze the question that they have with some geographic context. So what we've been thinking, and I have a partner in coordinating this workshop, Dr. Waverly Ray at Mesa College in San Diego. who does a great job of coordinating the contest and getting mentors recruited and judges for us to review student work. But the most challenging part is still what I'm doing with you here right now, hopefully, which is talking to teachers about how to get started and how to make this manageable within the course of their teaching responsibility. It can be that a school supports students in an after school program or some other kind of like club setting that's allowable too. But for the most part, we know it's classroom teachers having students work on projects during their normal instruction time. So that some of the things I've already shared with you, like the community EJ screening tool or the tool that kind of walk students through the process of extracting census data on their local communities, those could be a great starting point for students to assemble a unique kind of set of maps or data sets that they want to use to assess a kind of a local theme or a local issue. So maybe they're just telling a place story or a place history. And one of the things that I did that you haven't seen that I just kind of got inspired by this census map is updating some data sets about California's historical population growth. So that's linked off the slide as well, and I'll show you what that data looks like. See if I can share this. So it started with a project that, and here, let me put the slide link up again. It started with a project a friend created around redistricting and having people think about the challenge of districting for federal elections and representation, and how it's a necessary process because of population growth and the need to consistently adjust how people elect their representatives. And so what we did is put together some information about population growth in California over time. And initially, we just chose to focus on 3 decades, 1870, 1940, and I just switched the third time point to 2020. And in this case, we just looked at the 15 largest cities in each decade and then looked at change in time over those cities. We actually have a mapping activity where students could actually move around chips and represent the population of these cities and kind of think about the changing geography of the state. And so that was interesting, and it gets students thinking. And then I wanted to have kind of a comprehensive data set about county and local place population change. I'm a big supporter, you've probably gotten this from me, of kind of local or place-based focused instruction for motivating students and for making sure that students feel included and connected to what they're learning. So I just compiled this data set. It's just census data on every county in California and its population at every decade from statehood till 2020. And then I started thinking about, like, what does it look like to explore the data a little bit? So in the case of the county growth rates or the county population, I transferred that, calculated into growth rates by decade. Right. And so that way you can see kind of how not just the total population growth, but when population was happening very rapidly or very slowly. And over here, this is kind of a crazy graph, but I tried to just visualize each one of the counties in California's growth curve. So this spaghetti mess right here, each one of those lines represents a county. And what it's showing you is not the total population, but the growth rate. Right, so we can see, it's probably hard for you to see, this is from 1910 to 2020. Because the growth rates are very crazy in the first couple decades. So you can see, for example, a spike of growth happening around 1950. And you can see over here that that's Contra Costa County that's getting that spike. 1960, there's a different county that's spiking, and that's Orange County. These are two counties on the periphery of large metropolitan areas, the Bay Area and Los Angeles, that grew after World War II and kind of emblematic of California's population growth. They happen to be large counties, right? So they are now large counties that became large counties during these growth spurts after World War II. If we move to a different decade, I can find in the 80s, some different counties are peaking, right? The highest growth rates is this green line and this blue line. So what counties are those? That's Mono County, the blue line, the green line is Alpine County. So these are, if you think about 1980, what's this sound like if Alpine County and Mono County and Lake County and Nevada County are where population growth is happening? How would you describe that trend? Don't be shy, somebody. Sounds kind of like back to the land movement to me, like in the 80s, a bunch of people moving up to the Sierras and going, you know, kind of connecting with the land. But what's kind of a common thread about the counties that I just highlighted, Nevada, Mono, Placer, or not even Placer, what was this one? Alpine.
Border
Are
count?
those eastern side of the Sierras?
They're in the Sierra on the eastern side. There's really small populations.
Or western side, I guess, aren't they?
So where this big spike here that was in Orange County might have involved tens or hundreds of thousands of people involved in moving to Orange County to create that spike. We're talking about a county like Alpine or Mono. This is just a few hundred people moving to the area in a decade. That creates a spike because the county goes from 500 to 1,000 people. That's 100% growth rate in that decade. So this is just to show how kind of getting the raw numbers on something just as simple as population, you can then start to explore the kind of contours of the data and get to a story where you're thinking about what's particularly happening in this part of the state during this timeline to look at a growth trajectory. So similarly, I have a data set that is 482, I think, or 490 cities and towns, every incorporated city and town in California and its population at every one of those decades when it existed. So you can go through this list, kind of following through what we did with the initial activity. I've highlighted the 10 largest cities in each decade. And so you can see how some cities like Alameda and Berkeley had their period where they were in the top 10 cities in the state for a few decades in a row and then dropped off. Whereas a city like Oakland has been one of the top 10 in the state since 1870. Similarly, you can kind of take that, and I did a growth rate. Whoops, wrong part of this table. So this is just looking at the city and town populations by growth rate. And I just used conditional formatting, color coding to like look at when is the population growing rapidly, shrinking, or shrinking rapidly. And you know, the color coding of green and red is pretty intuitive. So it's just a data exploration, looking at some categories of growth and population decline to kind of tell a place story and to get into, you know, just thinking geographically. So this is what I mean about some like some story map starters, quick starters, things that students could maybe be given as a jumping off point for exploration. Any questions about those
Yeah,
particular things?
is a link to those data sets in the slides?
Yeah, so if you're on, let me get back to the slides. If you're on slide 5, then that California historical census data links to that census, that Excel sheet that I was just showing you.
Tom, I'm going to ask a question that I'm very tired, so I'm not really thinking, but in calculating these percentages, can you tell me, like, did you take the um the information about the census populations and divide like the previous year in order to get the
Yeah.
percentage rate?
So I'm a total Excel nerd, and I'm pretty sure that everybody would be better with just a better off in life with just a few more Excel skills. So all I did was I just, wrote a simple formula to do subtract 2020. We'll subtract 2010 from 2020, divide that difference by the 2010 population. Copy that down for every city, and then just copy that formula back for as many decades as I needed for each city or county. So it's just looking at the difference between the two time points and the percentage of that difference of the initial starting point. So it's a growth for each decade discretely. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I am really enjoying trying to teach students how to use spreadsheets to help do those big calculations. But sometimes I have to think about how to do that myself.
Exactly. Well, and what's great is to have the question, about how could you do that? How could you divide it differently? Because maybe, like, for example, that growth rate is really revealing about what parts of the state are hot and cold at any given time. But it also can get you thinking about what the heck is happening in this particular time. I'll put this back up again. I should have left it there for a minute, because I got particular glee out of one part of this once I did the color coding. And that was the fact that at the end of each city and town that disappeared, let's see it. Here's a cell, 100% population decline. So it's like an extremely finite indicator that town no longer is. And so there are several places you see. Here's one, Boulder Creek in Santa Cruz County. It came and went within 2 decades. Its first ever population recorded was in 1910. By 1920, it had 100% population loss. So that's like the meaning of boomtown. So I found this to be really interesting. I'm a person who kind of is motivated by stories and qualitative pathways, but I also really like finding the stories through data exploration and just exploratory data analysis. So give me a data set like this that you can start to think about the parameters and think about, like, a place like San Carlos and San Mateo. Doesn't ring familiar to me at all. But I know now that in 1940 and 1950, something was happening there, because there was, growth rates of 200% and 300%. So I already am pretty sure that with San Mateo being the county, this is going to be a World War II employment center, a place that boomed because of World War II munitions factories or something like that. All right, and then you can see how that place didn't go away. It's not a boomtown that went away. It just went on a much slower growth pattern after that initial boom. So you can see a lot of dark green at the beginning of these cities' population stories, a lot of spiky, rapid growth. Something's happening where those places are becoming meaningful all of a sudden, where they weren't even a place before. So that can be a place that's on the outskirts, a new suburb that suddenly opens up. There was like Irvine hit the top 10 cities in California for the first time in 2020. And in Irvine, a single housing development can open up and add 50,000 population in, just a year or two. And I'm sure that's what happened there. Dara, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that San Mateo, that county, or not San Mateo, Boulder Creek. And I know that there was a lot of flooding recently because I'm from that area. And I'm wondering, like where would one even start to look at like environmental effects in certain counties? Like just what hazards are going on in the last 50 or 100 years and in those counties.
So this is exactly what I love. The data gives you a really good question, right? So I was at another session at NCSS where I learned about newspapers.com and Chronicling America as two different websites that give you access to local newspapers. And the folks from History Day and the National Endowment for the Humanities had these cool lesson ideas where they were saying, take a topic and study it from the perspective of different localities. And so like they had newspaper stories about the Great Migration written from the South and from the North, talking about different ways people were thinking about and talking about the migration of African Americans north. In this case, I'd say you could go to those websites and look for a particular town name in a year's range and find out what's happening, right? Because whatever is happening, if it's drawing lots and lots of people, it's going to be recorded in the news in some way. And so students could go on essentially a research expedition to try and find the newspaper stories that give them clues about what was happening in a particular place at a particular time. I did also learn, not that after introducing Esri's software opportunity for you, I'm cautious about loading too much up, but I did learn that Ancestry has an educational program that is free to schools as well and gives students access to all of the resources that are on ancestry.com, which includes the newspaper websites. Has anybody used that Ancestry education?
Can you add a link of that into the slides?
Yeah, let me see if I can find that right now. It pretty cool ideas they have for lessons. There's, the most obvious thing that people think to do is to have students research their own family histories. And I very much appreciated that the coordinator of the program is like, you might want to think 2 or 3 times before you go down that route, because it can be really traumatic and difficult for some students if they don't have good information to carry out the assignment. But also, what if they learn something that nobody knew was going to come out and you're trying to deal with that? So they had some examples like picking a person in your community and almost giving them a gift of doing some like family research for them. So somebody in the school would reach out and say, is this okay? The students want to do some research on your life, and the person says okay, and then they have like a celebrating, a community leader type day where they share facts that they discovered about their life and their times in the place where they're from. And the other thing they did was pretty much what we were just talking about, which is use Ancestry's tools to do place histories and to just look for people and look for stories that root in the same place that the kids are from, so that they can get some connection to people who lived where they lived before they did. Okay, going off track, but that's what December is for. So anyway, the idea behind the story map starters is just to give some ideas so that you as a teacher could think about how to scaffold this as both an assignment and a learning experience for students, but also to help them get through that hurdle of coming up with a geographic question that's about a place in California or about California, because the contest is strictly about that. So I shared last time some examples of story maps that I created. So these are obviously not great examples for students because these are time and expertise that a professional has to put into these, but they can spur some thinking about the ways to utilize story maps. They could also look at examples that students have produced for the contest that have been good enough to get recognition. So I just put a few examples here on this slide. So any questions about the contest? Nicole's going to be our insider with insights from the perspective of a teacher who's done this all before. Oh, that's awesome, Lily. That's that local history can be really cool for students to discover. Okay, well, reach out to me if you're interested, and we'll take Nicole up on her offer to be supportive of those of you who want to do this for the first time. It would be fantastic, and it could become part of what we're going to talk about, which is your plan, your projects for the fellowship. Okay, so back to planning the fellowship. We'll use the rest of the time tonight to just discuss those of you who have an idea that's rolling around in your brain already, something that you would like to advance with the support of all of us here in the fellowship, with the resources hopefully that I can help you identify, but something that fits both what you think will engage your students and be a meaningful learning opportunity for them, but also that kind of checks off something that's on your own set of objectives for how you want to teach and what you want to accomplish in the courses you teach. So hasn't worked super well when I just throw it out for a general, hey, let's hear from somebody. But I'm going to try it again because I don't want to put people on the spot, because if you're feeling, it's kind of early, I don't really feel like I know yet what I want to do, that's totally fine. That's been my reasoning on kind of just sharing examples and kind of ideas with you. But if you do have something, we can use this time productively to advance your idea.
So I've been thinking about it. I'll go. I've done several of these projects with the GIS, and I usually am very broad and just let the kids pick something they want to, and then I get frustrated with the product at the end. So this year, for the first time, I'm gonna give more of a narrowed topic, and then they can choose from there. So we are gonna have salmon in our classroom in January. We're getting eggs delivered. And then, so we've just started learning about salmon life cycles and those kinds of things. And then we're going to visit the hatchery and release our salmon. So what I'm hoping and thinking is that we are going to do something related to rivers, dams, the ecology of the area. So it doesn't have to be necessarily salmon, but I'm hoping this is kind of a jumping off point to look at waterways and our watershed and come up with some kind of project that they can focus then on questions that they have. So we've just started actually today. They have a journal where they're keeping questions as we go through the next month or month and a half. And then hopefully from those questions, they can pick something that's interesting to them that they'll be able to do this with. My struggle with this project is always the data. And having kids make meaningful connections to the data. That's a big reason why I signed up to do this, is because I wanted more strategies on getting 12, because they're 11 and 12, getting 11 and 12-year-olds to, they can collect data, but then they don't know what to do with it. There's no meaning behind it. They can't analyze it very well. So I think that's where that's kind of my jumping off point right now. I don't know exactly what we're gonna do, but we just finished a National Geographic wildlife series too, looking at different places around the world. So I even got trap cameras. I don't even know what to do with them, but I was able to get people to give us cameras. So I thought I could even give kids cameras if they wanted to go and collect data around their areas or something. I don't know, but that's kind of where I'm at.
That's awesome. That certainly fits my thinking as well, about a kind of coming up with a common theme or a larger research topic that then students could kind of specialize. in kind of pursuing some questions. Salmon there's so much about like the kind of the conservation efforts, the ecology, you could get observation data from iNaturalist or another source about what the current state of the salmon population or salmon recovery. Certainly a lot of salmon connections between indigenous groups and kind of salmon ecology landmarks, environmental features. So very cool. Anybody have questions or suggestions for Nicole?
Nicole, where are you located?
I'm in Lodi, California, so just outside of between Sacramento and Stockton area.
Okay, because I don't know if you've heard about the Klamath dams up here in Humboldt. Well, more than just Humboldt County, but the Klamath River is a significant river that a lot of studies have been done because of historical fish kills over time, and they're now removing the dams and they're in the process of removing them. So there's a lot of research going into that and a lot of discussion about how long it's going to take for the rivers to recover. And there's a lot of talk about the salmon population, but that might be something to consider in terms of comparisons, just because it is such a big dam removal. I think there's 3 or 4 dams on the river that they're removing.
Yeah, no,
But
that's
anyway,
fabulous. Yeah, thank you.
yeah. So that might be a really cool comparative study.
Yeah, no, I have some kids who would definitely be interested in that. I teach a self-contained gate class, so they're my little go-getters. Yeah. So they're ahead of me usually. I'm always trying to keep up with them. So that's great. Thank you.
I would love to add in that kind of near Jen, down in the Mattole here, we are the only watershed that has a completely undammed and never has been dammed wild salmon population. And we have a local group, the Mattole Salmon Group, that has dedicated the last, I think it's been in existence 40 or 50 years, I don't know, to very carefully monitoring the salmon, counting the salmon, and they have decades of data for this specific river. They go out and do several spawning surveys every year and get counts of how many are coming in. They used to have a fish weir where they would count every single salmon coming upstream. So that's another little comparison point. We're a small river, but we're the only undammed river with still a live native population.
What river was that?
Mattole, it's Mattole.
Awesome. Thank you.
And the nonprofit is the Mattole Salmon Group, which that's easy enough to remember. But my good friend and neighbor is one of the main employees there. So if you wanted to connect with him directly, just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
I just put something into the chat that was something that we used in our classroom just recently that has a lot of data about just the state of salmon in California. So you'll probably be able to access data for the rivers around where you live. So it's casalmon.org, and it had not only bar graph maps that showed kind of the increase and decline of salmon in all the different major rivers in California, but it also has their where their spawning grounds are and where their historical spawning grounds are. So it's kind of a neat way to look at the history of their spawning grounds. So that's pretty fun too.
Awesome. Thank you. These are awesome. I can't wait to go back in January. Forget Christmas break.
I was just going to add to that, you might want to reach out to some local tribes. So I was on the Salmon River for many years working for a nonprofit there called the Salmon River Restoration Council, which is a restoration group that monitors salmon coming from the Klamath River and works with the Karuk tribe and sometimes with the Yurok tribe. So the tribes might be another good source of some, most of them have a GIS like person, a map, like their mapping is pretty extensive. So that might be another direction to go as well.
I love that. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick search, and there's a lot of restoration programs with data on ArcGIS online already. So that's kind of a good idea where, you know, students, if they see a map layer in a story map, they can then think about, you know, how they might add an additional layer of information on top of that, or put some things together. And Lodi, it turns out, has a Fish and Wildlife Office with a whole program. So you
Yes, no,
probably know about that.
I work with Kathy, yeah. They're storm drain detectives, and they do all kinds of things through there, so. Thank you.
Very, very cool. The impressively large salmon on there on that page right there. Okay, well, thank you, Nicole, for kicking us off, and clearly a topic that a lot of people can relate to, connects a lot of folks across California. So anybody else want to share a project idea or something they're thinking about?
I guess I'll share if you don't mind. I'm going to put a link. So Haley Salazar and I both teach AP Environmental Science. And so we met to kind of align some of the Cal EnviroScreen, some of the geo inquiry lessons, and look through some of those in the National Geographic Map Makers. So it's on this document right here to our units. But three of the ideas that kind of we had, that Haley and I, my students had worked with UCSD with air quality monitors last year. So mapping, we're in Chula Vista, so we're pretty close to the US-Mexico border. Also, Haley School is a little bit closer to, we have a landfill, and then we have a lot of air quality issues coming from the Bay and Commerce and Navy and things like that. So looking at air quality in various areas, and how maybe border traffic, even though with a lot of the trucks aren't cited for smog violations coming across the border. So we have a few air quality issues. So that also, we do some monitoring of our local estuaries. And so maybe mapping some of that, because we don't see, I haven't found any of that on one document where you can look at water quality, and our kids do like coliform bacteria counts and things like that. So that's the second idea. So air quality, that. And then another one that I would really like to do, that I think Haley has a lot more knowledge about, is like areas with native plants and mapping native plants, because we were working a little bit with Dr. Stan Rodriguez, Cumia, and he did a whole thing with my students about native plants. And so I think it would be interesting to be able to map places where native plants are thriving and where restoration can be taking place.
Well, excellent, and great to hear that you're collaborating, because I think that's motivating, and since you have no shortage of topics. And maybe, you know, some of the you know, they don't have to be separate topics. Maybe if students are thinking about environmental quality and the kind of systems that are impacting them, maybe it's hard to separate those. And, you know, particularly, I know in San Diego, we have become increasingly aware of air quality issues that are being generated by the water quality problems, which I don't think were something people were talking about much in the past. But in the effort to get people motivated to address the water quality issues, one of the things that's come to light is that it's impacting the air quality. So there's definitely connections there. Anybody have questions or suggestions for Gina or Haley? Or Haley, anything you would add to where you would like to go with this project?
Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I have COVID right now.
Oh, no.
But yeah, no, it's whatever. But another thing that, of course, that inspires me is watching the monarch butterflies. And so tying in the native plants with, and obviously that narrow leaf milkweed, and where we're finding that, because this past season found a whole bunch out in Otay. And so again, tying it into habitat restoration, pulling out invasives so that there's room for more narrow leaf to support our migratory monarchs is really amazing. Yeah, sorry, my throat is killing me right now.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for persevering despite
Yeah,
your diagnosis, and hope you feel better soon.
thanks.
I definitely, I think that particularly in our area and all of Southern California, really, native plants can use a lot of help. And so raising student awareness about native and invasive plants and how to kind of tip the balance is something that's much valued. Sarah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you were concerned about a
Yeah.
invasive plant as well,
I knew
right?
I knew you were going to call on me. I could feel the conversation flow. Yeah, so yeah, I'm really interested in helping my students, and not just this year, but year after year. There's been this problem on our campus. We have this redwood forest behind our school, but the students, there's trails behind there, and the problem is the English ivy. I think it's English ivy. And it's really invasive, and it's I feel like in fifth grade it's a good opportunity to really work in the invasive plant problem in ecosystems. And so what I'd like to, the students really want to pull the ivy, which is not easy, but they're energetic, they can do it. I would like to figure out a way, because the school's kind of stalled out on getting this ivy out of there, and I would like to get a base map created so that we can track progress over the years and find a way to measure the area and create layers on the map for that. That's kind of all I got. I'm a little overwhelmed doing it this year, so I'm gonna try to figure out what's manageable, but making progress at the same time. Um, that's kind of my project. I'm going to be mapping ivy reduction over, I don't know how many years it's going to take us to get rid of this darn ivy. And I think we're going to have to really make it a community effort, but I want to have good maps for people to work from to inspire people, because I know that good maps can really motivate people too. It's like, oh, look at, we did this last month. What could we do now? I'll map it for you. And that will be really cool to see the difference with the square footage that we're able to eradicate. So anyway, that's kind of my direction.
Thank you for responding to my direct prompt. I did, because you sent me an email about that, and that sends me off thinking. So I did access the county GIS platform. So there's some pretty great information already for students to just start kind of. I love the idea of just using the geospatial technology for them to kind of monitor and take account for that area that they get to they're going to get to visit it on repeat occasions. And I think just thinking about that, one of the daunting parts can be trying to map a whole area, because that's like a lot of information. But even if students just do like point in time analysis, where they make observations and then accumulate those observations over time. English ivy is a big problem, and it's particularly a concern for redwoods, because it will basically just get in the canopy and become so heavy it'll take the whole tree down. So one thing you might do is like look for trees with ivy and then document when you see ivy taking over a tree and then when you remove it. and mark that tree and see, does it come back? How long does it take to come back? And are you able to kind of progressively move deeper in? Because I bet, having surveilled the space a little bit, it's this finger of forest that connects to a much larger forested area, which is great, but it also is zoned for timber production. So it's not protected land. So possibly taking some ownership and stewardship of it might be a great way to get the ball rolling for a future advocacy for that forest to be retained as an asset of the school. There's like a 30-acre plot behind Dara's school that's got this chunk of forest in it. That's the kind of the edge of the town zoning and the beginning of forest zoning. So it's got a cool environmental learning opportunity and a place where they could make a difference on the way, the edge between the forest and the built up area. That's where the ivy is invading from. They can do the work.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that the aspects of the location is not, it's like there's an interface there with different land ownership too. And also I'm just kind of feeling like that could be something the fifth graders do every year is they teach the other grades because all the grades use this redwood forest. And some of the first graders just run around in there, and sometimes the third graders, everyone has a different relationship to this place. But I'm feeling like what an amazing opportunity to give the fifth graders stewardship, but then for them to actually teach each grade about invasive species, as as kind of their fifth grade curriculum in ecosystem studies. So that's, but a nice
Absolutely.
maps would
That's
be
awesome.
so anyway,
And-
that's where I'm going with it.
And they'll also want to know if that ivy is not supposed to be there and they're removing that, what are they hoping will come in its place? So that when that, that's going to be the victory is when a native plant reclaims that territory.
And that's going to be, for over a period of years for sure. But it would be nice to have identified a database where that would all go, like, oh, we just came from the forest. I have a team of students who sit and like enter it in. Anyway, I'm still forming the project really, but it has it could be multi years of getting it going.
Very cool.
I have a couple of ideas for you, Darren. I was thinking, when you were talking about trying to map the whole thing and pulling everything, you could always just take
Call you
like
back in like half an hour.
you could take a PVC transect and do like random surveys by just like, I've done it before where you just take like the metal surveying sticks with the little flags on them. You can easily like throw those over your shoulder and they tend to stick pretty well on the ground. And then you lay the transect over and you kind of just map out that transect area. So you've got some randomization in there. And then when you're mapping that over time, you can also start looking at, well, what's different now? We're looking at these transects, and you could choose to go back to those random transects and observe those specific transect areas over time, or just keep the randomization going. And then another thought I had for you was maybe talking to Friends of the Dunes. The reason why I say that is because they have their specific process for monitoring the overall dune health as they've been pulling out the European beach grass. So you could talk to them about possible ideas for methodology for tracking that. And they might have a system down that's might be easily replicated.
I really like that idea. We need to go there anyway. So I need to call to do an ecosystem, comparative field trip experience. So yeah, I would definitely, that's really great. And thanks for encouraging the randomization because I'm getting really hung up on area, almost like when fires go through areas, there's really nice fire maps of it, all kinds of intensity and area square footage that are covered. And I was getting really overwhelmed. But also the students feel really connected to this giant stump. And I thought, just another way would be to just go from the stump out. This is like, that's where their heart is, and they pay attention to it every time they get there. So any map could immediately have an identifying feature that draws fifth graders right to where we want to go. And also every first grader, all the grades have a relationship to this giant stump. So anyway, that's just kind of a weird idea, but I like the Friends of the Dunes is really inspiring, and I'm calling right away. I love that. Thank you, Jen.
I also have a transect PVC system that I just haven't had the time. I need to drill the holes and put the string in it, but I have a frame that I'll just give you because I haven't been using it.
Thank you. I'd really appreciate that. Anything I don't have to build myself. It's great.
That's,
I also, can I
Oh,
say
go
one
ahead.
other thing? I know that our local school has done some ivy removal up at what was formerly Patrick's Point, so Sumag Village or Sumag Park. Up there, they've done some restoration work that with the ivy removal, and there are state park folks up there that's their job, so they might be able to give some guidance as well.
Are you talking about Sumeg? Okay, thanks.
And I can email you a contact person. I've been working with a ranger up there, so I can also email you her address.
Thank you.
Awesome. This is the kind of collaboration. Once you share your idea, then people can direct their suggestions and thinking towards you. So I mean, there's the ideas that have been shared so far have excellent characteristics in terms of leveraging the combination of computer science or computer resources with geographic thinking or land-based questions. So that's awesome. But they also have other positive characteristics in terms of once you start digging into those problems, there is a community of professionals. There are organizations that you can start building alliances with. And opportunities for your students to, to learn from other members of the community that they might, not otherwise bump into in the course of their daily life. So awesome characteristics there. Okay, anybody, one more sharing we could fit in? Anybody?
I could share my idea. Maybe you guys could give me some ideas for some possible data to add to mine because mine isn't so much data focused, but I'm working on a project in creating lesson plans that are traditional ecological knowledge based in our state parks, United State Parks. So I'm working with our Native American learning specialists at our county office of ed and some of the rangers at Sumeg State Park to collect lessons about Sumeg that are more traditionally focused and creating a story map that connects some of these lessons to places in the park. And today I had a meeting with the learning specialist and we were talking about expanding it to, a region between two of our major river systems up here because this learning specialist is working with people all over our county to create these indigenous based lessons. So this is actually turning out to be a little bit bigger than I thought it would be, which is cool, but kind of overwhelming at the same time. Another aspect to this project is that we're going to be putting indigenous place names on the map for those areas that are of historical significance, current significance, I don't know. But I don't have any data really to add to that. It's just going to be like a collection of lessons or interesting information about with that indigenous focus. So do you guys have any idea of data? Should data be added to that? Does that make sense to it? I don't know. Crickets.
I was letting other people jump in, but yeah, I think like we were discussing just a minute ago, identifying native plants with practical indigenous uses or significance and then creating, you know, like some kind of understanding of where those plants grow, the environments. Now, some of that information can obviously be sensitive, so you want to be careful not to be broadcasting any information that's not appropriate to broadcast. But there's certainly lots of opportunities for mapping and connecting students to the resources of the park in ways that would be, I think, in line with everybody's goals. So I think that's great. And I had said to you, I think by email, that a story map is a great way to kind of set some parameters for a project and then be able to grow it over time and just add new components to it. So having something that's a regional basis, and then there's a component of it that's about the park that maybe is what you're working on most directly. And then, you know, it's also got space to incorporate things that are more about the eco region, because where the park boundaries are may or may not be relevant to some of the other stories that are, you know, important to tell about that environment.
Has anybody ever considered putting in data of like the migratory patterns of certain birds or whatever organisms are used for regalia? Because I would be curious about that, right? Like I know the hummingbird scalps are used for some of the regalia for, I think, a xerox, and I'd be wondering like, oh, where would you find these organisms, so that, you know, where were they normally harvested, and what seasonal patterns do these organisms have? So I don't know if that would be something that you could look at, but you could consider that, you know, for the various types of, for different types of regalia, I guess. That would be my only thought.
No, you just gave me a really good idea. I was spawning off of, no pun intended, Nicole's idea with salmon. Get it? Spawning. Um, anyway, no, that just gave me a great idea, because we could look at, you know, the decline in native species that are important to indigenous groups.
Mhm.
And if they're in decline, we can look at the percentage of decline over time and then relate that to possibilities for why.
Okay, good.
So
People can see.
I don't know, that just gave me a great idea. Thanks, Hugo.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, I didn't like pitch in for Dara. I actually have interned with both Friends of the Dunes and state parks, and have mapped their invasive grasses or invasive plants for both. And you know, I was thinking for your students in particular, one simple thing that we did for Friends of the Dunes was we literally drew polygons on like aerial photos or imaging, and, you know, did percentages. So it was like, there's 30% cover of Brizza here in this spot. And then for state parks, they were very interested in collecting point data. So we would go back into a specific spot and check, is this invasive plant come back? And I know you're focusing on only one species, you know, what is it, helix? You said ivy, right? So, you know, to keep it simple for the students, you would probably want them to kind of figure out how much coverage is there, and to figure out how much is reduced over time. You know, like do some kind of survey, either like the sampling survey, or just some kind of like generalized, like can we get a baseline of like what the coverage is in this one area. So, and they have a lot of data. So anyway, sorry. We can talk about it more later.
Thank you. That was great.
Awesome. And I think I saw Blanca. Did you have your hand up? Do you have a question, or do you want to be first in line for next time, Sharon?
Sorry about that, Thomas. No, you said you needed somebody else to share, but then Jen jumped in. So Jen shared, and you said you only needed one other person. So.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to keep folks late tonight because, you know, you've been good to come, but I don't want to overstay my welcome here. But I will expect you in January then, Blanca, to share. And if anybody has ideas that are rolling around in your head and you want to just shoot me an email, tell me what you're thinking about. I can do some background thinking, try and line up resources, or just kind of feed off your energy and hopefully get the ball rolling into something that's very interesting. So don't be sorry, Jen. We needed sharers. You shared. Blanca was ready too. So thanks so much for being here. I will share out. What was I gonna? No, I got you the link for the Esri. Was there another link I was gonna get people after? Let me think. I don't think so. All right, well, you guys email me if you have a question. Otherwise, have very happy holidays, and I'll see you all in January.
Yes, Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. We'll see you in January.
Thanks for coming. The days are going to get longer soon.
Oh, thank gosh.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Tom, I just was wondering.